it is your buddy, Peace and Harmony, with you here today. Much love going out to all the beautiful, empowered harmonizers. We are zooming in and focusing in on a great Vera question, and that is to talk about the female psychopath and really just sort of, I would say, what would be their fake identity. One really important thing that most people don't understand that is plausible when you are talking about a psychopath, you're talking about someone who has different brain structures that have been studied that, respond to when people are hurt, respond to when you should be afraid. Those sort of circuits are not sort of wiring and firing when they should be. So when someone would normally be alarmed, they don't have that feeling. They don't have that trepidation. They don't have that hard wiring. So when it comes to a psychopath, you have to understand that they have very different wiring, and really, I would say one of the more dangerous, or you might call it terrorizing, or really jaw-dropping, spellbinding, is really the aspect of a fake identity, a false identity, a false self. I mean, on the complete sense of the word. In other words, they're putting up a front or a facade. You must understand one of the most dangerous aspects, I would say, that is very complete about the female psychopath is the fake identity. They will fake whatever it is that they are trying to do. They are not real and genuine. They are superficial and glib. Superficial meaning very, very, just there's no emotional substance, very superficial. So someone who you see is very superficial, you might say, oh, they're lacking heart. They're sort of fake. So when we talk about a female psychopath, we're really talking about another dimension of fake, though. We are talking about people who have fake identities. They will pretend as if they have, because of their wiring, they don't get afraid of doing normal, certain things like faking to be somebody that they are not. In other words, faking to be in love, faking to be married, opportunistic, having an agenda, a false identity. They will have, what is very different, I would say, about the psychopath is their ability to have second and third lives. In other words, they can be simultaneously dating, simultaneously working jobs, simultaneously splitting between companies, things that you don't even believe that you would be capable or a person would be capable of, they do. This is just how they flow through their life. There's been brain scans that have been done about psychopaths, and these were done in inmates. But we're talking about really wiring where there is a callousness, there's a coldness. In a female psychopath, it sort of has that, but when you're talking about a high-functioning individual, in other words, highly intelligent, they can be attractive or unattractive. But they can, put together and be very sly, especially in the language. They can really get by people. They are very glib, from the Germanic glibbering, which is to be slimy. So when we talk about a female psychopath and having a fake identity, meaning they're falsifying as if they are in love, falsifying if they are to be married, falsifying and getting married, falsifying and having children, jobs. I mean, to the degree that you think that they could not act, they act. And it's very terrorizing and hurtful for people because there's this lack of human and warmth and emotional connection. So they tend to have a lot of authority or a seduction, what you might call the love bombing in the beginning. But then they are sort of sussing people out, sizing people up. How can they move them around like a target and to be as if? So it's a very deliberate and pre-calculated agenda that a female psychopath has. And a lot of people, I think, fall for the seduction, meaning not a come hither or a warmth, but it's more of a glib way, and you must understand that with that false identity, glib, the word glib, and so shallow meaning just made up. It doesn't have any depth, substance. We talk about your core I am, and that's coming from your abdomen. I am. You must exercise and stand in the strength of your I am at least a little bit every day. You should really get out of your comfort zone when it comes to strengthening your I am, especially if you are sort of rebounding from the exposing the mask or dropping the mask behind a female psychopath, or just trying to understand and compute. So the glib talk. So think, like a used car salesman. It's, very slithery. From the Germanic glibbering, slimy, which then became in the late 16th century, so the late 1500s, it became smooth, unimpeded. So this smoothness and unimpeded, it's really, when you observe it, there's a smoothness that just, they facilitate between things much too easily. And a lot of people find that quality attractive. They're able to parlay with this business, parlay with that professional, make time for this. And they're just very smooth and unimpeded, ultimately of Germanic origin, related to Dutch slippery and German slimy. So you just must understand that there is this quality that you might feel that they are so smooth, a smooth talker, no one else is like this, etc., etc. So the problem, though, is the faking of the identity. Meaning that they can charm and lie to the extent that most people would not be able to handle it in their gut. So you're talking about someone really who has an abnormal, psychological makeup or component, or so it's something you must become aware of, I would say, and teach your children too, because they will tend to prioritize their own self-interest. So, but it's masked by a lot of charm. They are not, your helper. What you see is not what you get. This is the problem. A very, very big problem for a lot of people who have found themselves enmeshed and in relationships with these people who they find that they are not who they say they are. A con man, a con woman. You end up finding that they do all sorts of different things. They might drain a bank account. They might mislead you into getting married, mislead you into getting into a business. I mean, all sorts of really life-changing decisions and places. And they feel no remorse and no regret when they have hurt people. They do not feel bad. They do not have empathy. The brain scans have shown that, especially in that study that was done in the inmates, 121 inmates in a medium security prison, they showed the brain scans of these inmate individuals, those who were incarcerated. And then they then asked the inmates to, they showed them images of people getting hurt and asked them to imagine another person experiencing that agony. In other words, what would it feel like? Something very, very, very painful. So the brain areas that are tied with empathy, which means you're able to go, oh my God, and then respond, for life saving, the anterior insula, the anterior mid-cingulate cortex, and the somatosensory cortex and the right amygdala were activated with less psychopathic inmates. And so they were activated less, so they don't have the same electric response. You must understand you're dealing really with another creature. But people can't quite get their arms around it, their head around it, and they're trying to either stay in or mitigate the damage, after. So it depends really where you are at. But realize the capacity of that. People say, oh, is it like multiple personality disorder? I would say no, they adapt certain presence or certain characters to fit in and then belong and then metamorphosize. It's really different. And I would say I've likened it to a similar animal in the wild, the other mammal kingdom, like the those octopus, when they are, they're traveling underground, and then they'll be kind of like a clay color, and then they'll change the texture and color of their skin when they hit in the rocky area. So these are people who are they camouflage, they try to hide in, they put on it's all a performance. It is not a relationship. So the problem is that it is not a relationship of substance. There is a hollowness, and it's very unfortunate, and it does not sort of fill up. It is always part of a psychopath psychological component and makeup. So if you feel that you have been duped or deceived, in other words, you have had a lot of false promises, not just like, risk or speculation that was, just human error, or things, things happen. We're talking really about people who, they are not caring. They are cold. They are conniving. There is something that they want, and they feel that they're, like in the psychopath, a grandiose sense of self-worth, that they sort of push others away and try to get attention, rather than being sort of receptive and attracting others. There's really a lot to be said about that. This is just what they need to do to adopt, to sort of release their flow, and it's business as usual for them. So if you have found that it did not fulfill itself, it did not carry itself through, realize that there's no inadequacy on your part. Realize that really, truly, it is just how they sort of, brush through life. I would say almost like a tornado. Very, very much like a tornado. So it's like all eyes on them. You're on like high alert. That feeling of sort of being afraid that there's a power there, a charm, a je ne sais quoi. So something that sort of gets your attention and might put you on high alert. So there's this agitation energy that is sort of ongoing. And but the problem is that it is destructive towards others, but it is not problematic for them. So the problem also is in that prefrontal cortex, where there is a sense of where your conscience is sort of created, a sort of right or wrong. It's sort of not there is no compass there. It is not a tool in their toolbox. It is not something that they use to navigate their judgment. It is not present. The moral compass ain't in the engine. It ain't wired in. The wrench didn't make it there. It is a deficit. It is the engine without this. It's kind of like if you've been in a car without a heater, it's missing that whole element. You're going to get cold really quick. It is missing a component. It is just like a car. So, realize that they are, these are your jet set, I'm not sure your people who are your jet set, very flashy or very covert, very subtle. Oftentimes, they don't give themselves away. But you will see the mask drop in certain, situations when they're either fed up, or I would say, when they're ready to sort of devalue and discard. In other words, they have to move on. There are these people who just kind of move on through a lot of relationships. And because of the inactivity in the prefrontal cortex, where they have that judgment, where the seat of judgment is, and then that of learning. In other words, to learn that something and have sort of a memory and then a vision of correction moving forward. that prefrontal cortex is not working to that, to that degree where they can then learn from certain emotional connections that you had. In other words, if you had a big fight, and then, made an agreement, this has to stop, or this has to begin, or this, these big, blowout discussions. And then they can be as if nothing occurred, several minutes later. And it's just like, you're not still hot under the collar after all that, or we just had, and you're just not ruffled at all. So they do not get ruffled. They do not show any sort of disrupt or disturbance, especially when there's something that you should have sort of a emotional connection or closure from. They have an inability to have this sort of transference of learning. And it's very strange, because those people who are not psychopathic and they go, wow, aren't you just sort of flustered by this? And they are not. They are just seamlessly put together. There's this glibness, a smoothness. They just make their way through. And a lot of people, are usually very impressed, by these people. But the pathological lying, meaning is they just tend to be stimulated by pulling one over on others. They just, if you've observed it, they will lie for no reason. It just gives them this sort of dopamine situation, which is their reward neurochemical. And so, the cunningness means, they just sort of, cunning, meaning they just sort of get something out of you without your knowledge. And, again, we're talking about things on a spectrum. So on all relationships, there's going to be ups and downs. There's going to be learning. There's going to be immaturity and immaturity. Immaturity and maturity, and then growing and saying, okay, this, and then, the security and stability from learning that. However, the psychopath realize that they have a way to communicate with their nonverbal body language in a way that sort of contorts and disrupts things. It's very difficult to explain. That would be a whole nother video. But we're talking really about the sort of false identity, where they can all of a sudden be somebody else, and then they have someone, a whole nother lifestyle that is unrecognizable to you. In other words, they sort of have a conflict of interest. And, this again is, they would say, why? This is the psychopath offsetting boredom. This is the psychopath, hiding. They're very parasitic. They want to latch onto a host for a while. I mean, that's a whole nother video, but the fake and falsified identity is really something one must look out for, and then understand, well, then what are the repercussions? What are the consequences? One, you must own what you understand. In other words, realize if this person has, depleted you of certain things, then you have to be very careful. If this is not a joined and a relationship of trust, there has to be that security and that serenity within, sort of a feeling of trust and a feeling of confidence and a feeling of sharing. And then if you grow together, and a feeling of amazement and joy and glory in life, where great, wonderful things happen and it's joyful and celebratory, but oftentimes these are the moments that the psychopath will take people down so they can't enjoy it. The attention must always be on them. And so they adopt this sort of and create this cognitive dissonance where they are, loved, or quote unquote, the expression, they will mimic but not have genuine response. So they, and then there's this sort of cognitive dissonance, which is a disconnect between their behavior and then what they are saying. So it creates a lot of mental confusion in people. It's very difficult to think and make important decisions. So that is oftentimes called crazy making. But this is a phenomenon I think you would witness in a female psychopath. This is your buddy, Peace and Harmony, with you here today. And I hope that these videos do help. Please share, please subscribe, and for goodness sake, please donate for more great tools, videos, discussion, and support. Peace be within, peace be without, peace be around you, and have a beautiful day.